Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, and I am your host, Adam Krautwurst, and with me, as always, for this podcast is Shawn Childs, the brainchild behind the numbers that we're going to be talking about tonight. No Jody tonight. No Mr. Full-Time tonight himself. Jody's on a little vacation here before the big push here for the NFL season, which is like right around the corner. I am so fired up. 1 week until I'll be in Kentucky, or a week and a half, 3 weeks till we will be in Vegas for the drafts. Shawn, are you ready?
I am not ready for the managed season long, but next week I will probably have two a day, probably 3 or 4 times a week, and progress. I got to get in tune with some of the other formats and the draft flows and get my head around. When I hit submit for my starting lineup, the biggest tell for your fantasy football team is it feels really good when you draft it, but when you go set your lineup, like, oh, wait a minute,
right?
I have decisions. Maybe it wasn't as good as I thought, and then after the first week, when they don't do what they're supposed to, then you're like, maybe I was wrong on some of these players. But it'll change over the season. But it's also a sprint,
I know football's. I can't wait. It's weird. I can't wait to start setting lineups. So lineups are fun. Waivers suck. I'm not gonna lie.
One quick question:
What's
when
up?
you draft a team, do you immediately set your lineup for that team?
I do not. Nope.
I go set them every time. I'm like,
yep,
all right,
I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. What I'll do is before I head out to Vegas, I'll probably sit down and do all of them, and then obviously over the course of that weekend, we'll be able to kind of mix and match those because I can't be. I like to get them set before I go because once I'm in Vegas, God knows what could happen when you're out there. But speaking of drafts, there's some drafts tonight, guys. Everyone who's watching, and there's a 10 p.m.'s kicked off. The 9 p.m. FFWC World Championship draft, the main event there is going on right now. There's a 9 o'clock draft. There was one opening left, Shawn. I was like, can I pod and draft a main event team at the same time? I cannot. So I did not do that, but there's a super flex bowl tonight at 10 o'clock, $50 to enter that. There's also a $350 mid stakes, the Circa Las Vegas Fantasy Championship online. A couple spots left for that at 11:45. I did that draft last night. That was fun. Picked from the 12 spot again. I'm cursed, Shawn. I can't get out. I'm literally in the bottom 3 picks every single one I'm in. I'm going to go through and look through them all and find out. I have so much Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra and all that stuff. But did you say there was some Amon-Ra news before the show broke?
Earlier today, he left practice with some sort of issue, and I don't think it's that bad, but there is not a clarification what it is. So that happened in midday around. And
Treylon Burks knee sprain. We were all nervous there for a second. Cut it off the field. Like, is he done? But they say, I think it's an LCL or something. Don't quote me on it, but I know it's a minor sprain, out for just a couple of weeks. So that's good news for Treylon Burks and all the Burks owners. But tonight we are in the NFC West. So we will go there. Jody is allowing us to do this without him. But the Cardinals, NFC West, kind of the bottom of the barrel team there, I think, with an over-under wins of 3.5, projected to be the worst team in the league. Shawn, are you interested in Kyler Murray at his kind of lowered ADP due to them not being good and him being injured?
Any season-long managed game, I won't be attracted to him. When you're doing the best ball things and you're at the back end of the player pool, in quarterbacks that don't really run it and don't have upside. I mean, at some point, he could emerge and he's capable of having a big game over the second half of the year. So, I definitely have him missing. I have him for 87% of the snaps, and that might be a bit much. He might maybe miss 4 games, but we don't. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have some clarity on where he's at. But his receivers don't stand out. Tight end's kind of banged up. Marquise Brown, should be okay, but it's just not a lot to get you excited about. If he has success, it's going to be him running, and he's coming off a knee injury. So what can you expect there?
Yeah, and there's no way to tell right now, right? We haven't heard any news about Kyler Murray. So the 87% of the plays, it could be literally switched with McCoy getting 87 and him getting 13. So we don't know that yet. You brought up a great point. The skill guys around him are not very good. And his strength is running the football, and I don't think he's coming back off this ACL or running around, especially for a team that's not going to be good. So I could see him. I mean, there's so many different range of outcomes for him. I could see him not playing this entire season. Like if they're like 0-11 or something, he's like, am I really going to come back and play for this team and risk re-injury or something? So I'm with you. I'm off of him, especially in managed leagues. I'm not trying to hold up a roster spot for, the entire season. So now again, if it comes out that he's only going to be out for 4 weeks or something like that, and the pup, that's a whole different story, but we haven't heard that yet. But so talk to me a little bit about like Colt McCoy or whatever quarterback you think is going to be the guy there. Are they worth picking as a kind of a late QB2 in Superflex or something?
Yeah, McCoy's just, maybe he can pass for 250 yards sometimes, a couple touchdowns, doesn't run much. He's been around long enough where he shouldn't be overmatched what defenses do, but his offensive line still has to give him enough time, and his receivers are kind of I guess Michael Wilson can is kind of a bigger guy, make some big plays, and Marquise Brown has some speed. Rondell Moore close to the line of scrimmage. Deutsch, is that how you say it? Deutsch.
Yeah.
He works his close to the run of scrimmage, and he had some good games last year. So it's just like it's more of like a chain mover offense with a quarterback that's not mobile, so it changes the whole profile of the team a lot. So they're just going to probably just get outscored, and that's at least out of the gate until Murray shows he's healthy.
Yeah, they're in trouble. Their defense isn't very good. Their quarterbacks aren't very good. Their skill guys aren't very good. So I think it's going to be a complete mess. Hey, Colt McCoy is not on my draft radar at all, even for super flex and all that stuff. So moving on to the running backs, James Conner's interesting. He got more touches last year when Murray was after he was out. But his ADP isn't really moved. He's going around RB20 right now, Shawn. You have him for 10 touchdowns. Where are you on Conner? I've been kind of off of him just because I feel like he's older now. He's banged up. He's certainly, like, I know we don't want to call players injury prone, but he certainly seems like he's injury prone, kind of in the tail end of his career on a really bad offense. Those usually aren't players I want to bet on.
Yeah, he misses about 3 games a year. He shows the ability. 2 years ago, he was really, really good at catching the ball and scoring in close. He's had some really good moments where he can be kind of a volume guy, and he's actually for kind of a guy that looks a little bigger sometimes. He looks deceptive, and like, man, this guy's a better player than I gave him credit to. But where will he be when you need him? And he's in an offense that's got questions. He's the running back, even depth behind him is not that great. There's nobody knocking on the door to unseat him or even steal playing time from him. So it's his job, and he's going to be on the field, and he'll get volume and he'll get some catches. But how many touchdowns will he score? But he is probably going to lead the team in scoring for sure. If he played 15 games, I would think he has most combined touchdowns even between running backs and wide receivers on that team.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, he's just a guy that he has to make it on receiving work because touchdowns, I know you have him for 10 total, but 3 of those are receiving, and those are hard to predict. You have him for 47 catches, which is good, not great. And on a team as bad as they're going to be, I mean, again, if he gets banged up, they might. I think this team in the second half of the season is going to be looking at the number 1 pick next year. And I don't think they're going to try to ruin that between their record and then the pick they have from the Texans. I think they're going to be looking at a top 2 of the top picks. So yeah, it's a team that running backs on bad teams and bad offenses scare me. So there's just other running backs in those range I would definitely rather take over James Conner. I have been taking a little bit of Keontae Ingram late because, again, Conner goes RB20, Ingram goes closer to like RB50. I'm willing to make a bet there if Ingram gets, half the season at running back or a quarter of the season at running back. How do you feel about him talent-wise? You have him for 24 catches, which isn't terrible for kind of a backup running back there. But if he wins the third down role outright, catch total could double.
Yeah, I have in this when I did the projections, I had Karna missing, like 3 or 4, probably 3 games in this. So there's opportunity for him. He was a little nicked up. Just, his college resume doesn't shine for
Yeah.
me. So, it's like, what's the attraction? And I know Tyson Williams was the lead guy last week. I have Marlon Mack on there, but I have to wipe him off the thing because I think they end up getting hurt and they end up knocking him off the team. So, but Ingram is he's really late. Most people think Connor's going to get hurt, so they like a cheat running back. And I guess, for a bye week cover, as a late, even a handcuff, he makes sense. But, I just don't, I can't fight for him because I don't think the ceiling's high enough.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on to the receivers, Marquise Brown. You have him have nice little season, 83 catches, 977 yards, and 7 scores. I think, again, he's going to be the number one guy there. And quarterback play really isn't as important as we might think it is when it comes to fantasy production. I mean, it's usually like the 4th or 5th thing that really kind of correlates to receiving production. We care more about how good the receiver is. We care more about like kind of the health of the total offense or average yards per target or targets or all that type of stuff. Quarterback play usually isn't in the top 4 or 5 things there. So that doesn't worry me so much. It's just they're going to be playing from behind. Good for him. Marquise Brown he's a little too inconsistent for me, and he gets a little bit banged up too much for me. 83 catches, 977 and 7. Is that, do you see a higher ceiling for him or maybe like a lower floor?
He stands out. He's been, he's produced at a high level. He's going to get the volume of stuff. And the quarterback, I guess the statement about the quarterback is the biggest difference is, a really good quarterback can finish off drives with touchdowns. And the guys that like McCoy that step in, they can't get, 35 touchdowns. He's not going to suddenly get a bunch of touchdowns. So he's going to be more in that low 20 range if he started the whole season, which he's not going to, most likely. So that really, handcuffs the talent of the receiver. So, Brown, last year we were pretty excited about him. Murray going to be there where they had, Hopkins there. You thought he would be the deep threat, played with the quarterback before. But, this year, they're not going to score a ton. And the team's kind of going in the wrong direction just by the prediction of number wins. So I think he finished wide receiver 36 in scoring, even though he's ranked high, scored high before that. And I think he's about the 35th wideout off the table this year. So just feel to me when he falls in that range with the Tampa receivers, just I don't want to gravitate to that stuff this year.
Yeah, no, I get it. He's in that tier with those guys, and sometimes I've clicked on, and sometimes I haven't. Last night, I think in the circa Las Vegas Fantasy Championships, I had picked 12, and at the 1, 2, 3, 4, at the 5-6 turn, he was on the board, and I went Elijah Moore over him, and I just like the upside better there. I like the offense much better there. Elijah Moore, I'm very high on him. So, but that's just the kind of example. Brown fell way past ADP. I took Elijah Moore a little ahead of ADP. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go get my guy. So, I've got some shares. I certainly won't be overweight on him. And just like you said, he goes in a range there but just mix and match kind of all those receivers.
You say that you pick 12 a lot, right? So
all the time
on your jersey, if you stand up, does it say Tom Brady 12?
It says Michael Jordan to 23. So, goats. It says
so you're rooting for pick one. So on the 2-3 turn, you can have better players.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, I mean, there's a couple other receivers obviously on this roster. Rondale Moore is kind of fading. He's not really, again, another guy gets banged up, tiny. Hasn't really performed preseason game, all that type of stuff. Dortch, we talked about. Michael Wilson's the interesting one to me. Rookie, big-bodied outside receiver. You've spoken about him before, Shawn. You only have him for 14 catches, 169 yards, and 1 touchdown. Those are undraftable numbers. Do you see him as being a guy that can win that number 2 role?
I guess his hands, would need to be there. And I get the attraction for the size, and he makes sense. I mean, I think Pascal's, still in the mix, and he's been around a little bit, chips in. So he's got to pass that guy. And if he passed him and then, one of those possession type receivers, if they don't, play both of them, he could slide up to wide receiver 3. But, I I guess I see the intrigue, but I'm just not, I need to see some more positive news where he's going to move up the depth chart before I move him higher, for now, because it's, Brown's going to get a lot. I mean, Rondell Moore's a pretty good player. He's just, close to the line of scrimmage, and, he doesn't stay healthy. But if he ever could stay healthy, he's capable of catching 80 balls, but he might only gain 10 yards per catch, even though he is pretty quick and fast, but just where he works the field.
Yeah. In camp, he's been running with the starters. Wilson has a little bit here and there. So I like his chances of passing, with Zach Pascal and Greg Dortch and stuff like that. So plus there's injuries and stuff. So I'm taking Wilson with my last pick, on a team where they lack that big bodied, really elite outside guy. Not that he's elite, obviously, but if they're looking for a big bodied guy, that could be Wilson. They drafted him, so they like him. Moving on to the tight ends here. Ertz is back off the PUP. Trey McBride's there. You have it. It's almost like a 50-50 split here. You have 45 catches for Ertz, 49 for McBride, 458 receiving yards for Ertz, 556 for McBride, 3 touchdowns each. If that's the case, these guys are probably both fades for me, meaning not draft. If one's there, I don't mind taking them. But if both are going to be healthy, I think they're fades.
Yeah, they've been jockeying. I mean, Ertz was on the pup list. He wasn't. There was really. I mean, it went. I think about a month where there wasn't even any news about him. And then he kind of made some progress this week. In the best ball drafts that I was doing, he was falling out of the top 20 rounds, wasn't even getting drafted.
Right.
But now when you're at the back end, I mean, I don't want to gravitate toward Ertz, but when you're, at least he's been there before. I've taken McBride when I thought Ertz was hurt as the last, if I get beat it, if I want a third tight end. But as far as the season long, Ertz would probably be in the waiver wire pool, and people, if he shows anything and, he has the resume in the past to be better. He could be a fill-in and maybe be a 5 for 50 guy, which he's kind of been, at the last few years of his career. So McBride's talented, but how many scores does that team going to have, and how many really targets is the tight end going to get?
Right. I don't mind McBride, just not this year. The offense just isn't good enough, and that's just it. That's kind of the answer to every player. The offense here just isn't going to be good enough. They're not going to be good enough. So enough with that. But moving on here. But before we do, again, trying to run everyone. We got some drafts tonight. The Superflex Bowl going on tonight, 10 p.m. Couple spots left for that. Also, the Circa Las Vegas Fantasy Championship online tonight at 11:45, like a little midnight madness draft for all you West Coasters out there. And then tomorrow, it looks like there's 2 spots left for the live or online, so you can do it either or. Tommy G Mayhem draft tomorrow. That's like an afternoon draft, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. So a couple spots left for that. So everybody got your chances to draft these next couple of days and get ready for Las Vegas, Nevada. Speaking of Los Angeles, Rams coming out here. Number 2 team we're going to be talking about tonight, Matt Stafford, the quarterback there, missed most of last season. Didn't look great. Back injury. Offensive line was terrible last year. What do we expect from him, Shawn, this year? What do you expect? Do you expect closer to 2021, MVP candidate, Super Bowl champion, or are we expecting more closer to 2022 for Matt Stafford?
I think the 2021 is more of the outlier at this point of his career. I think he's a professional quarterback. He needs the offensive line to be a little bit better. He's got a great receiver with Kupp. The secondary options, aren't, that sexy. He doesn't throw a ton of balls. Well, the Rams haven't thrown a ton of balls to the running back position over the last 2 or 3 years. I think he'll make plays. He'll go downfield. I mean, 2 years ago, they were phenomenal, attacking, down the field. But, Van Jefferson will help in that area this year, and maybe some of the other young receivers can, help, in the deep passing game. But overall, I just don't see enough. And then Kupp's got a little bit of issue. So if Kupp has any problems, this really goes sideways, and they could compete with Arizona as one of the worst teams in the division. Their defense has really one superstar. Yeah. Their secondary is in like full blown rebuild mode. So they, in the DFS stuff, they could get really kind of beat up out of the gate. So I think he's a good player. I won't draft him anywhere. Even if I have Kupp, I just don't feel good about the handcuff. Like you might get some games and like that, but I'm just not feeling it. What's their over under?
That's interesting. I don't know the over under off the top of my head, but that is interesting. That you talk about, not taking Stafford even when you have Kupp. I don't mind a little Stafford as my QB2. Again, I'm moving on to like redraft high stakes mode here. That's kind of what this is all about, full-time fantasy and FFWC and all that. Like, we're not talking best ball mode right now. And I feel like, if I don't mind taking Stafford if I end up with Cooper Kupp, and then I usually like to target Higbee because he's probably the only other really good pass catching weapon there. And I got those two. It makes sense to grab kind of Stafford as your QB2. But other than that, I don't think I've ever drafted Stafford without Cooper Kupp. So I'm right with you there. He's a guy that needs his offensive line because he can't move anymore. He never really was a mover, but I think his arm he's still got that big arm, and he's locked in with Cooper Kupp. So I think for Kupp's sake, I hope Stafford is healthy and plays well. Cam Akers, had a great playoff run last year. Kyren Williams might be projected to catch more passes. Shawn, how do you break down that backfield there? I know Kyren Williams is a draft pick of theirs, and I think he got hurt like on the first touch of his career in the Bills game, Thursday night game. I think he got like a high ankle sprain or something, and that was it for him. Cam Akers is an intriguing guy, but where do you split up the pass down work for them, and who are you targeting there?
Akers falls in a normal draft in the 5th, 6th round. And he's kind of in a no man's where I don't think I'm gaining an advantage. I know he played really well, and I have him projected for, 1,150 yards or something roughly, but I just don't see enough in the offense, and they were going to rotate a second guy in. Williams seemed like he had a little more upside in pass catching. But with Cam Akers, he had that struggled early last year. Middle of the season, I don't know where he was. He took a ball and went home or whatever. He wanted the ball more, and he left. And then he really came on, and people gravitate to, how he played at the end of the year. But if he gets off to a slow start and doesn't produce, I mean, his job security isn't high enough where he's a lock to carry the ball the whole way. So Williams has a lot to prove. I think he's an interesting player. Definitely would probably handcuff him with Akers if I was in that camp. I just haven't. The price point for Akers is really above what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a little more of a pass catcher in that range where, if he's my second running back for sure, if he's my third running back and I have like 3 running backs in the first 5 rounds, I don't feel he's as good as some of the receivers. So I'm definitely shying away from him.
Yeah, he's going to go in range with receivers there. I mean, he's around RB20 again. I'll pull it up in a couple minutes here where he's going in the FFWC. But yeah, a guy that I'm not on. Their offensive line is better, but it was horrific last year. He still produced at the end of the year, but I don't know. I just think he's a typical running back that goes there in the dead, kind of the dead zone there, the RB dead zone. And I just think he's a guy that is going around a bunch of receivers that I like. And normally that's how I'm building my team, running back or 2 early or whatever. And then I'm just loading up on receivers. So I don't think I've taken Cam Akers, but maybe one time in that draft that like really matters. And Kyren Williams would be a guy that I can maybe take with like a middle of the teens pick. Again, handcuff running backs. All running backs are drafted. People are always asking, oh, should I draft this side? Every like RB2 on a team should be drafted because you are one injury away from having a top 15 running back, right? So Kyren Williams is certainly draftable. Shoot, Zach Evans is probably draftable, with your last pick. So yeah, that's a good point on those guys, and that's kind of how I'm attacking them. Moving on to the Rams receivers here, Cooper Kupp is a stud. I mean, last year he was better than he was the year before when he was shattering records. There's no doubt about it. He's a quarterback playing the receiver position. Him and Stafford, when healthy, have been like maybe the best duo like ever over the course of a season and a half or whatever. But talking about Cooper Kupp, where do you kind of have him projected?
I would say that I probably have Cooper got rated lower than most. And I was really
even after the injury, Shawn, like even like lower in the sense that like he was going, pick 2 or 3. Now he's picked like 7 or 8. Sorry, go ahead.
I haven't changed his projections. I didn't downgrade him because I thought he would be. So whatever his projections are right now, they've been that way since beginning of July. When it's a really good player, I want to wait out the information and not be, just react to an injury. If I know he's got enough time to recover, I'll leave it the same. So the thing with him is that I don't think his plays are going to be as long and close to the line of scrimmage. I think he's going to command well over 100. I got him, 114 catches, 1,258 yards and 9 touchdowns. And really that's, a pretty impressive, almost a 300-point fantasy season. And there's no complaints, but CeeDee Lamb and Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, they're pretty impressive. And even A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra is not that far away. But like you said, Kupp is more attractive, discounted than he was for me at when he was getting drafted, 3, 4, or 5. If he slides to like 8 or 9, then he's worse. You figure, he's fallen in more in a range where you think he's competitive with those other receivers and those other couple backs that go in front of him, should be able to outscore him if the Rams offense backs up how we expect.
Yeah, exactly. And I just feel like, and like you said, their defense is a great point. Their defense is like going to be really, really bad. So they're going to be in shootouts against teams in the West with good offenses. Seattle, the Niners, and Arizona's defense stinks too. So they could score points on Arizona. So, I like Cooper Kupp. I like where you have him there. I think it's fine. Again, it's like 113 catches for 1,258 yards, 9 scored. I think the scores might be a little bit low because again, he's the only guy that they're going to be throwing to around the end zone like they were last year and the year before. Go ahead.
His over under, I think, at the sports book is 9.5 touchdowns.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, give me the over, baby. Give me the over.
Run to the window.
To me, it's just a health thing, man. If he could stay healthy, I think he's going to smash again. So, but I could certainly see people wanting to go Tyreek Hill in that range too. But not a lot else to talk about at receiver here. You just don't know. Skoranek isn't good. Tutu Atwell, Van Jefferson might be a deep threat best ball guy. But again, I'm trying to move on from best ball here. So I'm not really drafting any of these other receivers here. Anyone that, I know you got your projections here. Anyone kind of pop out to you, or are you surprised the way that their projections went?
I thought it was fair with Van Jefferson. I think he sits in the area in a draft. I look at him and I'm like, he makes sense, but I look for somebody else that's even projected for less, but plays in a better offense because I think they might have a chance to pop where he's, falls into that range where you think he's just going to be steady, maybe hit on a bomb once in a while and just not get to be where he's a difference maker. So
that's such a good point, Shawn. You bring that up. Some drafting players that are projected for less. Well, why the heck would you draft a player projected for less? Because projections and rankings are two different things, guys. We're talking about building rosters and roster construction. Van Jefferson isn't going to win you $150,000. You know what I mean? He's not going to win you $1 million. He doesn't have that ceiling outcome that a guy that's maybe being taken lower than him might have that potential to be, much, much higher or something of that nature. So, you get a guy like, I'm trying to look here. I mean, Van Jefferson goes so late anyways. He's going to
I'll give you the name, the Jalen Hyatt guy from the Giants.
You just took the name off the tip of my tongue. That's a great point. Go ahead. Talk.
That guy, he goes maybe a little after him, and it's an unknown, and the Giants receivers are messy, but he's the one that looks like he could be the big play guy, and he could emerge. He might be inconsistent, but if he hits the ground running, he could actually be their wide receiver 1. But that's it's speculating. But that's what when you're saying about the projections are a structure. Even if a guy's ranked with 180 points, the next guy that's 10 spots behind him is 10 points difference. There isn't much higher. So you do the projections, you get a mental picture, and then you need to know, okay, who do I want to go to bed with, and who do I think that can outperform their projections, and who do I think is projected will regress. So there's so many layers to this stuff, and not, at the end of the year, there is no right answers at the draft, but at the end of the year, there will be some right and wrong answers, and these will be really wide. I got that whiffed on him, and he was really, really good.
Richie James, Jalen Hyatt, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, all these guys that like maybe project worse, but like those guys have a chance at like a 3-week stretch when it matters at the end that can win you a ton of money. That's not happening for Van Jefferson. Even if Cooper Kupp goes down, that's not happening for Van Jefferson. But anyways, that's just a point I wanted to bring up. And I also said I would bring up K-Maker's ADP, RB24. Again, not as high as I'm looking at the FFWC World Championship ADP. He's actually RB22, going 1 behind Dobbins, 1 ahead of Pierce, Like I'm taking both those guys over him. The receivers are going around: Cooks, Gabe Davis, Elijah Moore, Smith and Jigba, Addison. I'm taking all those guys over Akers. There's just too many question marks there for me, for sure. Moving on to the tight ends for the Rams. Higbee's a guy I've definitely been targeting because the offensive line is a little bit better. The problem with Higbee last year, which everyone saw early on, was that they kept him in to block the entire time. And so he just wasn't getting out on pass routes. But if they can get back to where they were 2 years ago, where they got a little bit of time to throw, Higbee to me is the number 2 pass catcher on this team.
Yeah, he's just last year, he was just the dump off, 8.6 yards per catch. He had 108 targets, and he kind of got a lot of that stuff as the season moved on, especially when they had injuries and Stafford was out. And but to me, I just don't feel like he's going to get to another level. I think he's steady. I think he was last year 14th tight end. He's going to fall in that range where he's going to help maybe get you 9 to 11 points in, a decent amount of games, but the touchdowns probably aren't going to be there where you can pop a couple of weeks. And then we saw, there was a couple of, 2 or 3 years ago, he won some people a lot of money in the championship round. But then the next year, he was not the same. So I think he's a decent player. I just don't, like you said, it just comes back to the offense. Can he score enough? And, he's not a difference maker, but sometimes you just need a steady piece of the puzzle, at that roster spot if everything else is strong. And I think he's okay. Just maybe not a name that I'm, kind of gravitating toward.
The sick part is I think he's good enough where if McVay just decides to get him involved, like you said, 3 or 4 years ago, he had that best 8-game stretch ever for a tight end ever, when people so much money. The next year he had a touchdown week 1, 3 touchdowns week 2. And we're thinking, here we go again. But the underlying numbers weren't there. They weren't targeting him. Every time they targeted him, he scored. And then that year stunk. And then last year it was just. But I think if they decide, he was getting targeted so much, Shawn, basically what they did was they took the Higbee role and they give it to Cooper Kupp. They're like, listen, Cooper Kupp's awesome. We're going to throw the ball to him every single time. So I like Higbee as a tight end 2, or as part of a 2 or 3 tight end stable if you're waiting till the end of drafts to kind of load up on tight end there. But enough of the Rams. We're moving on to the Niners. But before we do, guys, don't forget we have some guys and gals. We have some drafts still open for tonight. Circle Las Vegas Championships tonight at 11:45. Superflex Bowl, a couple spots left tonight at 10 p.m. while we watch that FFWC World Championship main event draft tonight. So moving on to the Niners here. Brock Purdy, is the undisputed number 1 Mr. Irrelevant starting quarterback for the Niners. What does that mean for the Niners offense and Purdy's fantasy potential, Shawn?
Yeah, I was kind of early on. I wasn't sure he would make it back for week 1, and I thought that Lance had a chance to, have the inside track there. But he was just won so many games. He made the offense better. The receivers were better all around. Kittle really emerged late in the year. Deebo, I don't even think we saw the best of him, but Ayuk is a pretty good player. I think the passing game is at such a higher level when he's behind center, and he won games. I mean, obviously San Francisco is a really good team. Minimize the damage and turnovers. He just makes a lot of sense. And realistically, they kind of give him away in drafts now because they weren't sure that he was going to start. And their weapons are pretty good. They got 3, a good pass catching running back, a really good tight end, and 2 really good receivers. So there's a lot to like there. And I think he makes sense as a second quarterback on some teams, especially when you're, really kind of waiting on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, his weapons, you say good pass catching running back. They have the best pass catching running back. They have one of the best pass catching tight ends who they leave in to block too much because he thinks he's a franchise left tackle. All these, but yeah, no, you couldn't ask for better weapons. He has an elite offensive line. It's so Shanahan loves him. That's all I need to hear. He can distribute the football. That's what I want. I want a quarterback like Purdy for my skill guys. A guy that isn't going to run, is going to do everything the coach wants. He's going to throw the ball to the guys that need to get it. Purdy, I think, is perfect for this Niners offense. I love it. Obviously, we know, Christian McCaffery is a stud. He's a first-round pick. Does Elijah Mitchell have, standalone value here as we move on to the running backs? Christian McCaffery, I think you probably have as a top 2 back projected here, Shawn. But is Mitchell worth drafting, or is he even just a handcuff for Christian McCaffery?
He kind of is. Kind of when you got McCaffery, he kind of goes in a spot where I think it's more difficult to handcuff him for me.
Yeah.
You got to get through a couple of rounds. When you get from probably round 10, you can kind of detour. But in the FFWC, they shove so much on the wide receivers and stuff like that, even where he goes, I can't say that, it's a fair handcuff. You just need other players when he's coming off the board. But, he's fast and he can make plays and he's going to, break some stuff. And he's had, some injuries over the last couple of years. I don't see a lot of catches, on his resume. I think he's a talented player. And when they're winning games, he could have, 2 garbage touchdowns and, he could get 100 yards in the second half if they're really blowing somebody out. But, is he somebody that can stay healthy, But so I've drafted McCaffery enough, but I haven't handcuffed him, and he goes kind of in the zone where I'm not going to end up with him.
Yeah, Big Boss Scott says that Mitchell has a shot, but if he goes down, Mason is their guy. I think that's the smart pick. Is just pass up on Mitchell and go grab Mason with your last pick rather than spending a 9th or 10th round pick on a guy that he might be handcuffed today, but when you need him come mid-season, he's gonna be hurt or something like that. So you go get yourself Jordan Mason. Doesn't look as good now, but he could be Elijah Mitchell if Christian McCaffrey goes down. God forbid. I mean, you have a huge Christian McCaffrey season again. 1,098 rushing yards, 11 rushing scores, 82 catches, 667 yards, 5 more scores. I mean, it's such a monster season. People forget McCaffrey came over halfway through last year, was reading the playbook, in the limo on the way to the stadium. So he's got so much art that he can grow in this offense. I think he's going to have an absolute smash season if he can stay healthy. That is the question. Moving on to the receivers. Receiving core is fantastic. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. You have Samuel for 64 catches, 864 yards, 6 scores. You've got Ayuk, 78 catches, over 1,000 yards and 7 scores. You have Ayuk as the number 1 receiver basically on this team. Talk to me about that. And Ayuk must be one of your highly owned players.
Yeah, Ayuk is, I think pretty much his projections are pretty close to where he finished last year. I think that he got open, he caught the ball, 67% of the time. He showed growth in the red zone scoring touchdowns, and just the package looks a little more stable than Deebo. Deebo, the year before, he was really kind of a big play, going downfield, and then they gave him all that rushing, opportunities, and he looks like such an explosive player when he had the ball in his hands. And last year, he just didn't get as much room. His rushing attempts went down, and I only have Deebo for 24 carries. I think they're not going to use him as much, but maybe one carry this week, 2 the next, and he's really, when you're saying Mason is the backup running back, Deebo is the guy that actually, if McCaffrey got hurt, Deebo might shoot up and get more rushing attempts. So you got to, that's a factor for Deebo's profile. So I have Deebo projected a lot less. He had 1,300 yards 2 years ago. I think he was pretty impressive.
Yeah, he was wide receiver 3. Yeah, 2 years ago.
I had him a lot in that year, and I had him last year, and I got burned. But anyways, he's under projected, but he's drafted as though he has that ceiling. So kind of, I like him. He goes in the 3rd round, I think, in most of those in the high stakes drafts. And but Ayuk seems like he's a bit more stable value, more consistent for me right now. But I do love what Deebo brings to the table when he's on the field.
Yeah, Deebo's going at the 3-4 turn. Ayuk is going. Where's Ayuk going? Ayuk's going at wide receiver 30 at the beginning of the 5th round, 503. I like them both where they're going. Man, I love these Niners skill guys. There's just one too many. And the numbers prove that out. When Kittle and Ayuk and Deebo and McCaffrey are all on the field, they all are okay. They're all fine. When one of them is missing, just one of those 4, the rest of them eat. The rest of them crush their ADP. So I'm willing to bet on one of those guys being hurt most of the time. Kittle's already hurt. A lot of those guys get banged up a lot. So I am willing to bet on this offense. I'm willing to bet on McCaffrey where he's going, where Deebo's going, where Ayuk is going. The guy that I'm out on is Kittle. I just think he gets hurt too much. Now he does have those 3-game stretches that are league winning type stretches, but he's a guy that I just don't want to deal with that. And I kind of want him out of the picture so that Ayuk and all these guys can eat. Now Ayuk is the route runner. He's the guy that kills man defenses. Deebo is the guy that kills the zone defenses, and most teams play zone. So that's an interesting dynamic. I do agree with you. I think he will be getting less carries. Deebo will be, but I still love him. I mean, I guess I was reading something the other day. Shanahan was talking. So Deebo himself said he was embarrassed the way that he played last year. And then Shanahan's talking about Deebo sending him all these shirtless pics all off season about he's getting ripped, he's getting in shape, and be back and better than ever. So I think this Niners team, these guys are dogs. They see a Super Bowl in their future. They see it being the Super Bowl window, and they're all very talented. And this team could absolutely explode. When
you're drafting, you can tie the Eagles, core players, the Chiefs core players, or even the Bills core players with 2 or 3 of those receivers from the 49ers. Even if you ended up with the right combination, you could take Kittle, even though you don't like him. But it pairs well in the structure, considering the ceiling of both sides of the equation on offense. So I don't know how many people are trying to do that, but I think it kind of works well with the right draft flows.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. Jessel in the chat is saying that he doesn't like Deebo where he's going, and he also thinks that Ayuk is a flat out better receiver. I completely agree that Ayuk is a flat out better receiver than Deebo. Deebo is more of a gadget type of guy, but Shanahan gets the most out of those type guys. Where is Deebo going? He's going around DJ Moore and Jerry Jeudy. Give me Deebo. He's going around Christian Watson, Christian Kirk, Drake London. I would take Watson over Deebo, but I would take Deebo over Kirk, London. I'm looking for a guy that can have. I'm trying to build a monster squad, and I'm going to have a team that's going to have 5 receivers in the first 8 rounds, most likely. So I don't need Deebo healthy every week. I just need when Deebo's there for him to smash. We're not trying to build the safest team. We're not trying to build the healthiest team. We're trying to build a team that can win big time money. And so that's why I like Deebo there. But I will agree. Ayuk is certainly a more talented receiver, but the offense, he's a guy that they use against teams that play man defense. And not a lot of teams do, but I do love Ayuk. I love them all at ADP. Moving on to Kittle quick. I think we talked a little bit about him. Where do you have him, Shawn? I know it's hard to project a guy, that gets dinged up as much as he is. And a lot of his stats come in bunches, right? He'll go 3 or 4 games where he's doing 3 catches, 2 catches, 1 at nothing, and then he'll explode for 3 weeks. Usually those 3 weeks coincide with an injury to Deebo or Ayuk or McCaffery, something of that nature. You have Kittle for 81 catches. Really? 999 receiving yards. You couldn't get him to 1,000, Shawn. You couldn't find it in there somewhere to get him to 1,000.
Break that last tackle to get to it.
Oh my God, that definitely wasn't it. He's breaking all the tackles, and 8 touchdowns. So that's an incredible season you got for George Kittle this year.
Yeah, over the last 3 years, he's missed 13 weeks. So it's 3 or 4 games a season, and it's kind of, that will make people shy away. But that is included in his discounted price. But over his last 67 games, 5 catches for 72 yards. That's 12 fantasy points and a half a touchdown. So he's averaging, almost 15 fantasy points a game when he's on the field, which beats a lot of wide receivers. But, like you said, people will, that piece of the pie is a lot different than it used to be. And he had those couple monster seasons earlier. But now I think he goes in a soft spot in drafts. And I thought when you're, getting beat at a couple other positions and you feel like you get enough wide receivers and running backs and he's there and, 6th, 7th, 8th round in this format, he to me, I feel like I'm getting an edge at a discount. So I do gravitate towards him because I think he's better than the next couple behind him. And I'm completely out of the Pitts camp for sure.
Yeah, he's going it right now. I mean, it's not tight end premium, right? The FFWC. So he's going in the 8th round, which sounds fine. But he's going as tight end 5 ahead of Pitts and Goddard. If I can get Kittle as tight end 8, I would be okay with that. I'm definitely Pitts over Kittle just for the full season. I think he looks like he's getting his legs under him. And we talked about Pitts before. I mean, Pitts has a generational talent type season under him for sure, coming at some point. And then Goddard, I think is poised for us. I was listening to something today. They had the Philly beat writers talking about Goddard and how it's just he's uncoverable in camp. And now we all knew he was great, but they have to get him the ball more. But anyways, just the injuries with Kittle. Sorry, go ahead, Shawn.
Can Goddard score more than 5 touchdowns in a season?
That's what. Sure, he can.
He hasn't yet to.
If they throw him the ball. But yeah, it's interesting in there. I'm not full fading Kittle, but he's a guy that I don't find myself clicking a lot of. But I do love this Niners offense, Shawn. I think your projections say the same thing. Again, they're going to get some shootouts. They got some soft defenses that they're going to play. So I'm rooting for Purdy to stay healthy because we need a guy that's going to just distribute the ball to everybody else. Speaking of everybody else, here's the Seattle Seahawks, the rival Seattle Seahawks. We're going to talk about them after we talk about the FFWC leagues that are going on tonight, 10 p.m. Superflex, 11:45 p.m. Circa Las Vegas Fantasy Championship. Got some openings in both of those. Get in there, boys. Win Superflex Bowl. I love Superflex. I think it's like the newest, best form here. It's newer than all the other stuff, but I like it. And go get Brock Purdy as your QB2 and win yourself a championship. Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith came on strong last year, kind of proved everybody wrong. Comeback player of the year. I don't know what he was coming back from other than not being good, but it's not like he was good and then stunk and then good again. But you don't see Geno's breakout as a fluke. Talk to me about why that is, Shawn.
I think that he basically performed like Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson didn't perform like Russell Wilson when he went to Denver. So, he has the weapons, 2 really good receivers that have kind of ranked in the top 15 over the last 2 or 3 years. You add another dynamic wide receiver. He runs a little bit. He fits the profile. The defense is really, not that good, so they're going to be forced to throw a lot. So there's a lot to like about the Seattle offense, at least, as pass attempts. And, Geno looked the part. And I think that they paid him $75 million. And I think if you're getting paid $75 million, I think, they see it on the field. And I think that he makes a lot of sense this year, where he goes. I think he's a value. I think when we talked last week or one of these drafts that he went in the 17th round. I was like, that's kind of a steal, like that late for a guy that's got, 3 wide receivers. They get drafted in the top 40 something.
Yes.
So it's kind of I think it's a no-brainer.
That's like the Brock Purdy argument. Like, listen, people can be excused for the Brock Purdy, not really drafting him because people didn't know he was going to be the starter, even though, we all kind of knew he was going to be the starter. But Geno Smith's going at the 14-9 of the FFWC World Championship drafts. QB 15. I mean, what was he last year? Like QB 6 or something last year, maybe even QB 5. And he's got better weapons this year and another year in the offense this year. Like I get there were a lot of injuries to quarterbacks last year and down years for players like that, but he's a lock for top 12 with those weapons. I love Geno Smith this year. Plus he's got a little rushing upside to him. You've got him for 331 yards and 1 rushing score. So, and the offense is great. Geno's good. Weapons got better. Count me in. Speaking of weapons getting better, Zach Charbonnet was added to this backfield here in the draft. Round 2, Zach Charbonnet. He's a guy I've been targeting as a handcuff. So are you in or are you out on Kenneth Walker this year after the drafting of Zach Charbonnet?
I was out on him originally because you've seen him go in the 5th round and in this format, like the 6th round. But when Charbonnet had the little shoulder injury, I was like, that's just enough to shift it back to Walker. But then somehow Charbonnet is healthy like 2 days later. His shoulder.
And Walker's not, right.
Yeah. So, Walker's got the little groin injury. So I think Walker's a really talented runner, and I like what he did last year. He just really had some big games, and then he had some kind of, clunkers, but I think he can play. Just doesn't catch enough balls for me. And I think that Seattle tried to improve their pass catching, running back depth in the draft. McIntosh, I think he got hurt already too. So Charbonnet, could be really kind of the third down, maybe get those few catches. And, he's not like an explosive, difference maker, pass catcher, but I think he's definitely more capable than Walker. So I think the combination fits well. But people gravitate to him like he's going to have a higher ceiling, and I'm not sure where he goes off the board if I'm willing to, invest in him. maybe if I have the handcuff of Walker, I'd be a little more intrigued, but I just haven't had that combo.
Yeah, it's an interesting backfield. It's like it's these type of backfields where I just want to take the cheaper guy and like bank on like, we never run a route for injuries, but bank on the injury to Kenneth Walker or something like that. They drafted Charbonnet for a reason. Even if he's the clear-cut handcuff and doesn't get has no standalone value. I feel, Kenneth Walker, running backs rarely play every game. Kenneth Walker was already dinged up last year. He's already dinged up this preseason. So I see there being room for Charbonnet to kind of eat there. So Charbonnet goes as RB 36 right now with the 911, and which is a spot that I'm fine drafting him depending on the build. Kenneth Walker is going at the 510 as RB 18, so he's almost twice the price that. And again, he's going around, other receivers that I like taking, and Walker's just too much of a question mark for me. I love Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker to me was what Zach Charbonnet is. Kenneth Walker to me last year is what Charbonnet is this year. I was taking all the Kenneth Walker when Penny was the guy and Penny was the starter, banking on injury to Penny. Penny gets hurt. Walker's a top 7 fantasy back the rest of the way. I say to do the same thing this year. Fade Walker, draft Charbonnet. If you get an injury to Walker or Charbonnet, it doesn't even have to be like a season-long injury. Anytime Walker's out and Charbonnet's in, you can count in the RB1 numbers from the Seattle running back. So that's kind of the way I've been treating that backfield, Shawn. But the big question mark here, the things that people want to know, is this talented receiving core. Jessel in the chat wants to know, he thinks DK is being severely overdrafted. He thinks he might be the third best receiver on the team. We don't have to address that specifically this second, but people have questions about what to do with these receivers. Cause like you said, 3 top 40 receivers, good quarterback, good offense, but what do we do with these receivers?
Well, Metcalf he has that, what you're looking for. He's that big physical guy. He can make big plays. He could score in close. He's got to get that mid-range of those short passes so where he, has that potential to get to 100 catches. I think he's actually the wide receiver on the team that could push to be a wide receiver 1 even higher. I think he's kind of in a soft spot where I think I'm really getting a beast there with more upside. Even with the other 2 wide receivers on the team. I think Lockett's got the resume of being a top 15 receiver. He's proven he scores touchdowns, 80 catches, 1,000 yards. He tends to be a little more up and down. He'll he got a little more consistent last year, but he'll pop in on like a 35, 40-point game, and then he'll go 8, 10, and then kind of have a game. But, we add Najigba, which is getting really, really good reports, and there's really a lot of excitement around this player. Really going to overlap maybe a little bit more with Lockett, but I think that they're going to get all them guys involved. But, Metcalf has been a top 15 receiver, top 8 one year. I think the talent is there, and he goes in the right area of the draft. So I'm kind of against the grain of that comment there. But, the other 2 they go get drafted really close for me. And how do you get Lockett with a resume? The other guy has to at least get to Lockett to pass him. So, but sometimes you got to draft backwards. You draft Najigba for the upside, and you could still get Lockett and maybe end up with both of them. So, you got to read the board and where you're at in the draft. You want Godwin or Evans, or you want to go for Najigba. The offense fits the profile you're looking for, and then Lockett. So you can flip flop them all you want, but there's a lot to like. How this shakes out will be very interesting to watch. And I could imagine, one of the championship teams is going to have one of the Seattle receivers at the end of the year.
Yeah, no, I like all these guys. So kind of, to kind of talk about DK Metcalf here, I don't have a lot of him, but that's only because he's going in an area where I'm getting my running backs. I really feel like the 2-3 turn right now is a sweet spot, with the running backs going all over the place. The news is changing here and there. I love taking Jahmyr Gibbs in there. I love taking, Stevenson in there, Derrick Henry, like Jonathan Taylor's been going kind of in and out of there. Now he's out of camp again, stuff like that. So, I find myself taking one running back or so, sometimes a quarterback, maybe not in this format because quarterbacks go a little later, but if I do take a receiver, I don't mind Metcalf. I mean, Metcalf historically is a double-digit touchdown guy. He had a ton of what do you have, like 90 catches last year, Shawn? And he only had like 6 scores or something super low for like what he would project. So I feel like Metcalf, there's some room for growth there, and he offers them something that like that team doesn't have. I think Njigba and Lockett will kind of eat each other's work underneath intermediate stuff, whereas I think Metcalf can still get those touchdowns. You have him for 88 catches, 1,100 yards, and 8 scores. You have him leading the team in receiving scores. I think 8 might even be a little bit low, according to kind of what he's done in the past. So I like these guys more for best ball because, like you said, you can mix them and match them. But again, we're trying to move on to the high stakes. We want the high stakes takes. I'm a Metcalf guy. If you can get him in the late third after the running backs are gone, and I'm a Smith and Jigba guy at ADP. I feel like I like that kind of scratch off ticket of what Njigba can be. He's going right now as wide receiver 38. And whereas Lockett's going as wide receiver 31. I would much rather have him at 38 than Lockett at 31. Speaking of 31, I think Lockett is 31 this year. So he's coming to that age cliff pretty quickly. And so I think this is the year that Smith and Jigba Smith and Jigba is such a talented receiver. He was eating at Ohio State with all the other receivers around him there too. He's super talented. This is almost the version of like their running back room. Like if you take in Jigba and one of these starting receivers goes down, Smith and Jigba is going to go bananas and he's going to skyrocket. So I don't know. That's my take on him. Shawn?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much, if Lockett's going in front of him and Jigba is a wide receiver 4 with upside, he kind of fits the profile, especially in, the double flex format at full time. So he makes a lot of sense. If he does anything this week in the preseason, he's going to go up even higher. This is the week where you want like a player like that to be semi-quiet. Can you just get through this week because he's not playing probably the week 3 in the preseason. So
right. Yeah, right. So. Yeah. I like the touchdown upside of Metcalf. I don't hate any of them at their ADP. I say, listen, no one drafting is doing one draft anymore. Mix them and match them and get, based on like the upside, based on how you want to build your teams. I have more Lockett and Njigba than I have Metcalf. 100%. I have more of those guys, but that's just because of the way that I like to build my team. I could certainly see Metcalf being a nice piece to a nice team like you were saying, Shawn. So, all right, moving on to this tight end room here, which is no good, which is good because we don't want any more targets going to anybody else. But you've got Noah Fant for 49 catches, 516 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That's not nothing. How were you able to get him to 49 catches with all these other weapons on the team?
They threw the ball a ton to the tight end position last year, and they obviously did not have a really good wide receiver 3. I think the group of tight ends is pretty good, but Fant's gonna get the lead, but the other 2 are gonna command some looks. I think they just sprinkle it in. I just think last year Smith used them to move the ball, so I tried to steal some of the tight end targets from last year and shift them to wide receiver 3. And ideally you need Seattle to throw more passes to make the wide receiver 3 in this offense and the tight end have, some value. But I don't think Fant's ever got to where we thought he would when he got drafted. And, especially when they rotate in other tight ends. So Parkinson guy kind of came on late, made some plays. And, it just, it's a funny mix in the tight ends, especially when you add a really good, wide receiver 3 in this offense. But I think they'll complement and have some games once in a while. Especially first week of the season, teams always kind of, they gear up for the big players and the wide receivers, and sometimes the tight ends sneak in those touchdowns at the goal line because of the communication with the switching off and some stuff. So, out of the gate. So
we're talking week 1 DFS right now, Shawnee. Is that what we're doing?
Next week, I have to start doing the projections and start writing about, the first week of the season.
Oh.
So I try to get in front of it, before, I got to go to fly to Vegas on the 5th. And
you got to do it. You got to go fly to Vegas on the 5th. That's right.
Yeah. So I got it's punishment. So I got to get in front of it. I got to get all the work done and then, just do the maintenance of the projections, when we get all the news, who's not playing and, more information, who gets cut and, is somebody going to be inactive, early that we don't, we think, Breece Hall or something's going to play, maybe Cooks is inactive when we go on. You never know. Right.
Oh my God.
That'd be something. But, so those situations will kind of figure their, way out. But that's next week.
He probably will be. Listen, if I don't draft tonight, I draft like every night now, which is fun. But I'm up to doing these late draft last night, went till 1 a.m. It was fun and doing all that. But maybe tonight I'll settle in and set some lineups. You got me kind of Jones in here, Shawn, to start looking at week 1, setting some lineups here. And
you should set the lineups and knock out the waiver wire stuff that you have, because the first waiver. But the first waiver period, you can sneak in those guys for cheap money because people are flying to Vegas and they're drafting. But, you got that. I mean, have you drafted any leagues that like Deuce Vaughn was undrafted? Would you add him to your team?
I'm sure Deuce Vaughn's undrafted. I mean, Shawn, I've been drafting since freaking January. So
you got to try to sneak him in for $6. Well, he'll go more than $6, but
yeah, no, I get it. Oh, would you just? Shawn just gave up a little info. Go to 7. Go to 7 if you want Vaughn. Let's go. But awesome. Great show tonight, Shawn. Again, we got some spots left here. 11:45. Circa mid stakes tonight. We have a starter league tonight at 10:15. Super Flex Bowl tonight at 10 o'clock. I mean, drafting all night long for you guys. Jump in there, have some fun, get ready for Vegas, which I will see you there, Shawn. And I'm excited about that. And we won't be doing a show next week live because I have the Deep End Invitational going on all week next week, but maybe we get one in during the day and we post it in the evening, but I'm sure we'll be on soon. Shawn, anything else?
Just, it's happening.
It's happening.
It's happening.
I love it.
They're flowing up and down with all these injuries, and hopefully you survive and no key players get hurt.
That's it. It's so hard, man. I've done a really good job this year of I'm still spending the same amount of money, but I'm pushing those big stakes drafts back because I just don't want. I've done 2. I've done an FFWC main. I got another one coming up here soon where it's just, you're sweating out these injuries that are happening. I put out everything, but that makes it, you're the last week before. It's like I feel like I'm Chad Schroeder with a draft every hour of the day, but it becomes more business than pleasure at that point. But I'm trying to avoid these early season injuries. But anyways, enough about me. Thanks for joining me, Shawn. Everyone, thanks for getting in the show. Don't forget to like it and follow it and subscribe and all that fancy stuff. But we'll see you guys soon, and happy drafting.